Take it away, Ryan.
Thank you. Again, my name is Ryan Nicholson. Today we're going to be talking about rethinking reporting. So I wanted to welcome you to the September webinar hosted by Bullhorn Academy. We're going to be looking at ways that you can dive into reporting using Bullhorn, but we also want to look at some ideas to maybe change your approach to reporting based off of what your needs are. So today we're going to cover data management. We're going to look at identifying your reporting needs, and then we're going to also look at various reporting options that utilize Bullhorn. So one of the most important things that you want to keep in mind when you are considering reporting is that reporting can only be as good as the data within your system. So no matter what reporting option we're talking about, whether it be in Bullhorn or an expensive third-party solution or any type of any situation, you're going to want to consider how you manage your data when you are considering your reporting options. So some of the things to consider before you even jump into this concept of let me figure out how to report on my data within Bullhorn, you want to make sure that you have standardized processes. You need to define them and enforce them within your company. So a lot of folks realize once they start trying to do reporting that 3 recruiters in one office may submit a candidate one way and 5 recruiters in a different office might do it a different way. So you really want to sit down and look at your process from A to Z and make sure that you've got a defined process that's the same across the board. Once everyone's doing the same thing, then you can report on that activity in a confident way. Now, for those of you who haven't done this yet, or you're really getting to the point where you're ready to do it, you want to think about change management when you go to enforce these processes. A lot of folks can push back on you when you try to formalize a process so that you can have good data. So you want to consider change management in any of these situations. Really plan out and get buy-in with your team to ensure that everyone's following the same process so that you in turn can have good data to report on. Additionally, you want to make sure you pick your best administrator. So a good administrator knows your business inside and out, knows Bullhorn inside and out, and can recognize how to bridge the two and ensure that your data stays good, but also that you're using the system in an effective manner and that your recruiters understand why they have to do what they need to do and that they're willing to do so. Additionally, you always want to trust but verify. You want to check on your data to make sure, you want to do some sort of quality process to ensure that your data is correct. You want to check in to make sure the jobs are being filled out correctly, candidates are being inputted the same across all of your organization. Those are key, and in order to have regular spot checks and to be able to effectively do that, you need a good administrator and you need a good team to be able to check up on your folks. Now, once you've identified that your data is good and that you've got a good process in place, then you need to really sit down and look at your reporting needs. A lot of times when somebody calls into support saying, I want to get into reporting, I want to know what's within my system, a lot of folks don't actually have a concrete idea of what they're trying to do or why they're trying to do it. So you want to sit down and do that first. The first thing that you want to do is identify what your business goal even is. A lot of folks just have this lofty idea of we just want to report on numbers. Have something you're trying to fix. Have a goal in mind, whether that goal is to have more efficient stand-up meetings in the morning so that you can figure out what's going on at that moment in time and move on and plan out your day, or if your business goal is I want to look at our different markets and see, can I move into X or can I move into Y? Is this profitable? How much the money that I'm spending on my sourcing, is that good? Those business goals all impact what reporting solution you want to pick. Additionally, you need to consider who's going to be writing the reports and who's going to be running the reports. So from a writing perspective, you have to ask yourself, do we have a dedicated person who can write reports? Are we talking a business analyst that knows business intelligence tools and knows how to write SQL or query a database? Or are we going to have a front end supervisor or the recruiter itself writing a report because they want to get numbers together and just wrap their head around productivity or whatever it may be. You have to ask yourself, what's the technical capabilities of my report writers? And that's separate from who's going to be running the reports. So your folks who are going to be running the reports, those individuals may have varying amounts of technical abilities. So if you have a very advanced tool and it takes a lot of clicks to get into the report and run it, are we going to want to, is somebody going to want to schedule those reports? Are they going to want to be able to toggle back and forth between a lot of different options? Are they going to want to be able to customize the report when they run it to sort of slice and dice the numbers? These are all questions that you should be asking yourself before you even jump into what are my reporting options, because it's imperative to have those goals in mind so that you can make a good decision. So as we look at the reporting options that I'm going to present to you today, I want you to consider each one of those. Think about your business goal, think about your capabilities in-house, if you're going to bring someone in or hire someone on for reporting purposes, or if this is just going to be an extra gig for someone. Consider those as we look at each one of these options and use that as a tool in order to make a decision. So let's take a very high-level overview look at all of the options that we have. So here's a good list in order of sort of the most training required and least training required of our options. So Bullhorn Canvas is a full-on business intelligence tool. You're going to be able to do just about anything that you want, but there's going to be some time that you're going to need to devote to training in order to be able to jump into that. Now, on the opposite end of that, we look at our list views and our standard reports, and we have these other reporting options that are much less training required, and you could dive right into it, but there are going to be some pros and cons, and we'll take a look at a few of those here in a second. So wanted to reiterate, as we go through all of these options, we're going to be sending you an email with links covering every single one of these items that we talk about. So if you feel like we're shooting through things too quickly, please know that we're going to send you information after this. It's going to have more detailed information, so you'll be able to review the reports in more detail and answer some of your questions that you may have. So now that we've outlined what a lot of our options are, let's go ahead and get pulled into Bullhorn and take a look at that. So the first thing that we're going to look at right out the gate is our standard reports. Now, our standard reports are available on the menu, home, and then reporting. Now, everyone's got access to this regardless of the version of Bullhorn that you have, whether you have Team Edition, Corporate, or Enterprise. We're going to take a look at one specific report, but there are a multitude of reports. Every single one of these standard reports are identified in our documentation, and it breaks it down for you, everything that they can do and where these numbers come from. But one of the things that I want to highlight for you all is that these are standard reports, which means they require a standard workflow. If your company has a more customized workflow, you may have to try a few different options. So let me take let me run this report for you and show you exactly what I mean. So this is the job activity report. I'm going to just do a simple report for year to date. I want to see all of the job activity at my company for this year. There are a lot of other options in here, that filters that you could run through. I'm not going to cover those in detail on this particular session, but again, the documentation that we share with you after this will break this down line by line for you, so you can get some more confident understanding of what each one of those options mean. Now, when you run these reports, you're going to see quite a few items appear on the screen. Obviously, we've got some nice graphs here that break it down by departments. We've got a whole host of numbers that appear where we can talk about submissions and some ratios and response rates. This is what you really think of when you think of very traditional reporting. These are the options that most folks think of. This is what I want out of reporting, but there may be some things that you want to be aware of as you're using these as your reporting solutions. Because it's a standardized workflow, I'm going to dig in here to Sydney and take a look at something to show you something that can sometimes confuse some folks. So in my Sydney office, I have one person. His name is Matt, and I can see from this report that he has no offers out on his project manager job. Now, I'm a little confused because I had a meeting with Matt earlier, and I know he told me he sent an offer out on this particular job, but it's not appearing on my reports, which makes me think that maybe my report's inaccurate or is missing information. In reality, if I open up this job and I look at the submission list, there's a submission here at the very top for Andrew. This particular submission has a submission status of offer out. Now, what gives? It says 0 offers up here, but I clearly have a submission that says offer out. Well, again, I want to reiterate that these are standard reports, which means they have standard requirements. There's an assumption that you have a standard workflow with standard submission statuses. So for this particular report, in order for it to count as an offer, it has to have a submission status of offer extended, not offer out. Now, considering my needs as a company, that may or may not be an issue for me. Maybe I just change what my submission status is from offer out to offer extended. I can use this report and I'm happy and I'm ready to go. Maybe offer out is what I use in my Sydney office because that's what they call it locally and it confuses my folks if I change it otherwise. Then I might need to consider a different option for tracking my information, or I need to look at a custom reporting option or something like that. If it's impossible for me to change my workflow to match the job activity report so that it displays the information as expected. Now, again, every single one of these reports that we're covering has documentation that will go through every single one of these fields and tells you it must say this and must say that. Every single one of these reports are outlined on our resource center, and you're going to get a link to that after this webinar. Now, considering that my needs as a business, maybe the use of this report isn't exactly what I need. What I want to do is improve my stand-ups. So in the morning when I look at my jobs, I want to be able to jump into things and know what's going on. I've got a manager hopping in on me and they just want an update of what's going on with all of my jobs without interviews. Let's get a move on. What are we closing? Now I want to take a shift gears here slightly and take a look at our dashboard cards. So our dashboard cards are available to our Enterprise Edition, and our Enterprise Edition allows you to have a lot of the graphical information that's really helpful to meetings in a more usable space. So what I've got set up here on the screen right now are 2 dashboard cards side by side. One of the things that folks may not be aware of is that all of these dashboard cards that we have, you actually have the ability to have multiple copies of the same dashboard out there with different criteria set to it. So on the European teams that you see on the top left here, I actually configured this to set to certain departments, and it has a date added of this year. And you can go in and toggle a lot of these options so that you can have multiple of the same dashboard cards. So you can have your whole team laid out there or multiple departments and compare them side by side. Now, you can't necessarily export or print these, but you can think about what are we using this for? If we're using this in real time and we're having a discussion at our morning stand-up about this, maybe the sort of traditional report isn't what we need. Maybe what we need is a screen at our meeting. Maybe we need a tablet or a TV or something like that and Bullhorn pulled up with this information on here. Now, why in the world would we do that? When I think of a traditional report, I think of PowerPoint, I think of Excel, I think of these graphs that we're going to have a meeting and a discussion and make decisions and then move on from there. Well, if you utilize Bullhorn and you sort of think outside the box of what you define as a report, and you think about using these dashboards and the live Bullhorn as your report, you have a lot more options. So for example here, let's take a look at August 2017, jobs without interviews for my European team. I actually can click on each month here and it filters this list down here for me. So it shows me I've got 3 jobs in August without interviews. Now these jobs were added in August. They don't have interviews yet. It's getting to the end of September. I'm getting heated about why don't we have interviews? Why haven't we replaced this? These got to be closing soon. But the issue is that I can't do anything really with this information. I could see that they're accepting candidates. I could see who the owner is, but I can't do much with that information. So what I can do to be more proactive with my information is I can actually click on this link here that's jobs added, and it's going to open up my job list. Now, if you don't think of your job list as a report, you absolutely should. The the list view that you see here is exactly the same type of list view that everybody has. So the dashboard cards that we were covering cover Enterprise Edition. If you don't have that, you can still utilize a list view. And we're going to go through a couple of options here that are going to give you the same purpose and the same effect so that you have a good way to sort of take action on these reports. So if you take a look at the search here, all that going from the dashboard card to the job list did was run a search that just about anybody can run. These are my open jobs. I filtered to without interviews to a particular date added. So if you don't have the right edition for the dashboard cards, you can still build out these searches and use these list views as your reports. Now, if I'm looking at this and I'm thinking about my stand-up in the morning where I want to take action on these and I want to talk to Colleen and Nancy and John about their jobs, this list view that I have right now doesn't have exactly the information that I want to see to have an effective meeting. So one of the things that I do for my reports and for using my list views as a report for having those meetings is I saved a couple of different layouts. I've got a stand-up layout here. So I'm going to go ahead and click that, and you're going to see that my filters, or not my filters, my columns have changed now. Now I've got a lot more relevant information in front of me so that we can have an effective meeting. So I've got a lot of the dates. So I've got the date added, the start date, and numbers for my submissions and client submissions and statuses. So now I can go in here and I can say, all right, Colleen's at my stand-up. She and I are talking about this job, why we don't have an interview yet. She told me that she needs to review some more web responses. Now, in my meeting, I can go ahead and do the slide out and add a note within here and say that Colleen and I had this conversation and that she's going to check in on web responses. Now, normally when you have a meeting, you use your Excel or you use whatever tool you're going to use for reporting purposes, you have to sit down afterwards and send out emails, or you have to have somebody taking notes during that meeting and to follow up. So while we're using reports and we're getting our information, we're still being kind of inefficient in what we're doing. Instead, here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to, in real time during my meeting, tag the sales manager distribution list that I wrote up, and I'm going to create a note saying that we had a conversation about this. So I know what's going on. I know Colleen's getting an email, and I know my sales managers are being updated because they're getting an email copy since I've tagged them in this note. Now I can create this note. We've had this conversation, and when this meeting is over, I'm done. I don't have to sit down and do a follow-up email. I don't have to recap everything from my notes during the meeting to make sure that everyone follows up on whatever they may need to follow up on. That's happening in real time. So while the list view may not, again, reflect your traditional idea of a note, or of reports, it has a lot of functionality that allows me to move beyond just sort of traditional reporting, and I've got real-time information that I can look at. I can dig in, and when you get those folks who ask a lot of deep questions during the meeting where they're like, well, what about this? What about this company? What other jobs are going on in this company? Is this somebody that we need to check in with? Those questions sort of lead naturally out of reporting. We're able to take action on those and dive into them right then and there. So if you're not pulling up Bullhorn during your meeting, you really should consider that as its own reporting option. Bullhorn itself, with its list views, allows you to save different layouts. You also can favorite searches. So if you have regular conversations about different topics during these meetings, rather than having different reports, if you will, why not just save a search? Now, if you save a search, we may have a different column layout. We can run that search at any given time, and it will reorder our list view based off of our criteria that we've put in the past. So we've got a completely different search here. It's instantly got that information. So I could set these up for different recruiters. I could set these up for different offices and have multiple saved searches. And every time I sit down to have a meeting, it's going to rerun that search. And when you rerun that search, you get the most up-to-date information, and you can move through your options here and start having discussions and moving through your business. So a lot of those common reporting questions that we get really have to do with, I want to use it more productively. I want to get more information out of my system. There's a lot of the stuff that's built in that doesn't require any additional money, doesn't require any additional plugins or anything like that that you can utilize. You really want to rethink when you're considering your reporting, what you're trying to achieve. Think about that. Take a look at your favorited searches. Take a look at saved layouts, and you'll be able to run with that and get a lot more done with the system. Now, there are a few things that you may notice that you can't do with the list view. One of the things is, if we're really looking at numbers, are we really diving into fill ratios and summaries of how long it took us to fill a job, those types of things. Then you're going to start looking at some of the reporting options that are more numbers based. So let's take a very brief look at our Canvas options. So Canvas is our business intelligence tool. It comes with a few standard reports right out of the box. And one of the ones that we're going to take a look at is a sample report for recruiting activity. Now, this is an extra add-on. You don't have to have Enterprise, but this is a paid feature. So if you're interested in this particular tool, you're going to want to talk with account management or with your account manager to see what options are available to you. That being said, let's take a brief look at the sample report for recruiting activity so you guys have an idea of what this feature can do. So I've set this year to date. You notice that it looks a little bit different than our standard reports because I built this particular pop-up here, and it can contain whatever I want. So you can set it so that it automatically filters out certain things or has certain preferences preset to it ahead of time. Now, when I run this report, obviously we've got some different options here. This report, or this particular graph that you see here, isn't the most jazzed up report you may have seen. You have the ability to change the colors, the layout, different types of reports. All these columns that you see here are customizable, and you can go in and edit those if you want. So right now, the data that I'm looking at has every department across the world for me and all of my submission information, my recruiting activity. What I'm going to do is I just want to see the US based reports. So what I can do here is I can actually go in here and copy my report and go US recruiting activity and save that, and it'll allow me to build a different version of the report that's pre-built just for my US team. So it's made a copy. I'm going to modify this report, and it's going to open up our Canvas Studio. Now, the Canvas Studio is how you write and modify your reports. One of the things that I wanted to remind you of is when we're talking about writing and running reports is that this is where we start getting into that area of does my team have the capability to handle this? All of this is built on SQL type queries, as well as the IBM Cognos tool. So there's a lot going on here, and you can build a lot from scratch, and you can do a lot with this particular feature, but you have to know what you're doing. You're going to need training, or you're going to need someone that understands how to write and query expressions for databases. If that's something that scares you, if that sounds beyond your capabilities, it's way beyond your team, that's fine. This tool might not be the best choice for you, and there are other options that fill the gap for you. That being said, for the folks that really want to write up queries and do calculations, this gives them a lot of options. If you're interested in more detailed information about how exactly this is going to work, I highly recommend you reach out to your account managers to talk about this in a little bit more detail. What I want to take a brief look at for you guys is what options bridge the gap between these two. So you can purchase Canvas for any edition, but if you don't have the full ability on your team to write reports using something like an SQL query or what have you, if that's a little bit beyond your abilities, what's a good option for you? Well, this is when we start talking about our marketplace partners. They fill a good gap for, I want to be able to do a lot more deep diving into my numbers, but I don't have the time or resources to devote to sort of building reports from scratch. So one of the partners that you can look at, and again, all of these partners are covered on our marketplace website. It's marketplace.bullhorn.com. And you can look into these individuals on a more in-depth basis on that website. Plus, you can get more information on these partners and reach out to them directly on that website. But one of the ones that's very popular is Cube19. So they have a lot of metrics and reports that they can run. They also have this cool feature that's called Slice and Dice, which lets somebody maybe with a little bit less training just go in and start clicking on numbers and going, well, what about this and what about that, kind of dragging things around to ask those more in-depth questions. Cube19's got all of that pre-built for you, and they're happy to show it off to you. So I would highly recommend checking out the marketplace website to see what options they have for you, because they're going to have a lot of pre-built reporting options for you once you're starting to get into going out into a little bit more in-depth number slicing. One of our other partners is Insight Squared. Now, Insight Squared, again, just like Cube 19 has a lot of pre-built reports that are super handy. This is one of the neat ones that they've got where it tells you where what errors that you may have in your data. So this one shows that there's 72% of my job orders created in this period are error-free. Now, what does that mean? That means there may be, on the inverse of those, the 28 or so % of job orders may be missing fields that I've determined have to be filled out, where they have numbers that don't make sense. Maybe they don't have pay rates in them or bill rates or something is missing. And I can deep dive into that to find out, okay, why aren't my guys filling out their job orders correctly? And that gives us more information on what I can do with my data. So Insight Squared and Cube 19 are two of our options. There are other marketplace options. I highly recommend you check out the website and see what's available. There's no cost on our end for you guys to use these partners. Insight Squared, Cube 19, whatever partner you decide to go with might have requirements for paid accounts with them. So you're going to want to check in with those partners to see what your options are as you're kind of weighing all of these out. If you're interested in Canvas and you want to see what the price is and compare that to Insight Squared and so on and so forth, you're going to want to take a look at all your options before you sort of pick one to end on. So we've covered a lot of information today. I really want to reiterate to you guys, we're going to send you out links and we're going to open the floor here to questions in a few seconds. But again, we touched on Bullhorn Canvas, marketplace partners, dashboard cards, standard reports, and list views. And we did it at breakneck speed. This has been recorded, so we're going to send you guys out a recording of this. And again, we're going to send you some links after this that have a little bit more details. But right now, I just want to we've got a very brief time, but let's take a few questions.
Thanks, Ryan. Yeah, we just have a couple more minutes. Want to be mindful of all of your time, but let's start with this one. The first one is, am I able to schedule standard reports to run them at specified times?
So standard reports, outside of Canvas, just the standard reports that are built into Bullhorn, there's no scheduling functionality that's built into that. So you'd have to run that report and then you can export it to Excel or what have you if you want to fire that off to someone. Now Canvas, it does have an option to schedule reports if that's something that you're interested in. You want to, you've got somebody that wants to sit down every Monday and have it in their inbox. That's possible with Canvas for sure.
Another one here on standard reports. Can I customize the CSV export of standard reports?
Okay, so standard reports have the ability to be exported. And just for those who aren't familiar with that, let me pull that up with you guys really quickly. So when you actually go to run this report, so this is the job activity report that we were looking at earlier, there's an option down here to export it to Excel. You can, so there's an export level that's right here at the bottom that goes basically summary versus detail. Now what the difference between those two is when you run the actual report itself, it's basically, do you want to include the expandable information? So if you have a summary version, you're just exporting the numbers to an Excel file, and then you can go on there and splice it as well, and do whatever math or what have you that you need to do, but you don't want the data. So the only thing that you can do is basically choose between including the expandable information or not. As for like the columns themselves, if you want to change those around, you can't really do that. You'd have to use like a list view and customize your columns in the list view and then export a list view as a CSV in order to get different information exported out.
Thanks, Ryan. Well, we are just about out of time here, so we're going to go ahead and end the webinar today. There were some great questions asked that we will handle offline, so we'll be in touch shortly after we wrap up. And again, keep an eye on your inbox for the recording and some follow-up links. And thank you so much for joining, everyone.
Thanks, guys.